Chap- Chapter 7, Artistic Logistics. Button pushing. Children are forever moving and interacting with their world. Everything is new for them, and their job is to be curious, explore, and learn. Nothing is off limits. With this wonderful curiosity comes the desire for our children to button push. Button pushing refers to our children exploring our reactions to their behavior. What will we do if they do X? What will happen? Will it be fun? It is all about them finding out about us and the world around them, and how our actions affect their environment. We often give them good reasons to continue to button push, because our reactions can be fun and amusing to watch. We may shout, jump up and down, speak in a high squeaky voice, or turn red or stiff with rage. It can be as funny as watching a cartoon character. When I was younger, I knew exactly how to get an amusing reaction from my dad. I just had to get a fit of giggles at dinner time, and I would never be disappointed with his reaction. His face would stiffen, he would point his finger at me and talk in a stern voice, and start to threaten all sorts of consequences that I did not want. But I enjoyed the fact that I could invite such predictable behavior in him. The reaction I wanted was named the wobble effect by my sister and me. When he got angry, his whole body would wobble. And whatever the consequences of my behavior, I found this amusing enough to continue. There are many ways that your child may button push. Crying and hitting are definitely two of them. I will talk about hitting and crying in the following 2 chapters. I have dedicated a separate chapter to each of those subjects. This chapter addresses the other varied things that our children do to try and evoke our often dramatic responses. These include, but are not limited to, the following: peeing on the floor instead of the toilet, drawing on the wall, throwing their food, spilling water, spitting, swearing, picking their nose and eating it, throwing a toy and breaking it, twirling a finger through their hair, poking their chests, talking about a subject that people can find uncomfortable. For example, I worked with a family who had a 9-year-old boy on the spectrum. His whole family were vegans. They did not eat any animal products and were very concerned for the welfare of animals. This little boy would love to talk about eating meat. He would talk about eating a juicy steak of animal flesh and lick his lips while looking intently at the reactions of his family. They were horrified, believing that they had failed to pass on their own values. They would gasp at the statements and shake their heads, raising their voices as they lectured him about the welfare of animals. He did not want to eat meat. He just wanted to watch the horrified reactions of his family. I worked with another boy who, due to his food allergies, was on a gluten-free and casein-free diet. He would tell his mom that he had just eaten gluten or casein. Then he would sit back and smile as she shouted and lectured him on how this was not a good thing. He actually never ate the food he was not allowed to eat. He just loved watching his mom's reaction. Another children of 5 was more dramatic. Whenever he was in public and there was a baby, he would declare loudly so that everyone could hear, "That baby is ugly." You can imagine the discomfort and shocked faces that would arise from such a statement. How to identify your button push. If your child's attention is on you and you react to the activity, it is likely to be a button push. Look for the following signs. They look at you while they are doing the activity. They look at you right after they have done the activity. They announce to you that they had just done the activity. They smile or laugh when you react to what they have just done. They do it again right after you have asked them not to, while looking at you. They do something they are not supposed to do, and then come find you to tell you. Special note: If your child does an activity when they're by themselves, let's say they might be ripping paper or playing with water, they may be focusing very intensely on this activity and not noticing anyone around them. Even if you see what them doing it and you give them a big reaction and say no to them, your reaction alone does not mean that it is a button push. If they were doing it by themselves, it is most likely one of the repetitive activities is in stims and is not a button push. A button push is an activity your child does to get a reaction from another person. The key factor is that your child's attention is focused on your reaction, not on the activity yourself. Exercise 7.1. Take a moment to think about your child. Think about anything they might do that you give a big reaction to. Now think about whether they seem interested and are looking with amusement at your reaction. When you have done that, write down your child's button-pushing behavior on the button-pushing worksheet at the end of the chapter. Why do our children button push? It is fun. It is as simple as that. We can be very entertaining for our children. Our reactions at times can be disproportionate to the actual actions of our children. All of us have experienced walking away from our children asking ourselves, why did I just react in this way? In this over-the-top reaction that our children start to look for again, and it is this over-the-top reaction that our children start to look for again and again. As children, all of us have pushed other people's buttons too. Why? It can be very funny. Remember those long car trips as a child? I remember one such trip when I was 9 where I found much needed entertainment by pushing my sister's button. She did not want me to touch her while I was reading her book. Knowing this bothered her, I kept touching her shoulder with my finger. Every time I did this, or just pointed my finger in her direction, she would explode into high-pitched squeaky yelling, which was met with my laughter. It feels powerful. When our children realize that they can create a reaction in us, not only is it fun, it gives them a sense of power in a world that they often experience as chaotic. Our children start to realize that they can now make another person react. Along with this newfound power comes a sense of control. When I do X, Mom does Y. Our children begin to think, aha, great, I can have an impact and control my world this way. As we discussed earlier, having control in their lives is very important for our children. Thus, button pushing can become another way to gain this control. It could be a sign that they're becoming more interactive. If you find that your child is suddenly going through a particularly intense period of button pushing, it may be because they have become less exclusive and have grown in their interactive ability. When a child on the spectrum becomes more aware of the environment, they start to notice that what they do can cause another person to do something. If this is the case for your child, it is an exciting and important time of growth for them. It could be a sign that they are understimulated. If your child has increased their level of button pushing, it may be a sign that they are being understimulated. They are button pushing because as a form of entertainment, just because they have nothing better to do. Sometimes school programs or home-based programs can become stagnant. It may be that your child has grown and needs more interesting and challenging activities and learning opportunities. Reassess your child's program to see if this is the case. Give them different and more age-appropriate activities. 3 easy steps to deactivate a button push. Change your internal reaction, change your external reaction. React in a huge way to something you do want them to do. Change your internal reaction. Our children button push to explore our reaction to their action. When our reaction is interesting to them, they will continue. The fastest way to stop your child from button pushing is to deactivate the button by changing your reaction. You want to do this on an internal level as well as on an external level. Many times, parents tell me that they were furious with their child, but that they managed not to show it. I've seen no successful way to do this. If you're actually furious, then it will show on your face and your body movement. Your body will stiffen, your eyes change, and your jaw tense. Your children know you, and they know the difference between how you sound and behave when you're at ease and how you sound and behave when you're tense, uncomfortable, or annoyed. However much you may want to, there's no way of fooling them. Exercise 7.2. Take a moment to think about what thoughts go through your mind when your child does this button pushing behavior. Go to the button pushing worksheet at the end of the chapter and on the lines provided, write down the internal feelings or thoughts when your child button pushes. If you're having difficulty coming up with an internal thought or feeling, read through the ones below to see if any of them sound familiar to you. I hate it when she does this. She's only doing this to bug me. I can't stand listening to this any longer. I just do not like this when she does this. I can't help it if I don't like bodily fluids. She should know better by now. She's just misbehaving. Okay, so this is the really exciting part of this chapter, because you can change the way you're acting in relation to your child's button pushing behaviors, and then you can help them to find another way to behave. You have a power to make a difference by changing yourself first. The first thing to do is internally relax. Find a way to become relaxed with what your child is doing. You can do this by softening the thoughts you have about the action your child is doing. If they're spilling water on the floor, you could soften your thoughts about it by thinking to yourself, it is not the end of the world, it can be tidied up. If they are talking to you about a particular subject you have found uncomfortable, or maybe they are telling you that they are going to throw all their toys out of the window, soften your thoughts by reminding yourself that they're saying this not because they believe it or will do it, but because they want to see your reaction. If they are screaming in a high-pitched way that you have previously found hard to listen to, soften your thoughts by reminding yourself that the sound will not go on forever and that your child is doing this just for a reaction. Embrace the sound and tap your toe to the rhythm. Yes, you can do that. By relaxing into the sound and embracing it, you will be more likely not to overreact and will be one step closer to not hearing it again. Let that be your incentive. The more you can soften your thoughts about the action your child is doing, the easier it will be to change your reaction. Then it is more likely that your child will lose interest in doing the action. Change your external reaction. Exercise 7.3. Take a moment to think about what your reaction is to your child's button push. What does your voice sound like? How do you move your body? Go to the button pushing worksheet at the end of this chapter and fill in the section on how you respond externally. Below are some common reactions that might be similar to yours. I shouted her to stop. I moved quickly over to her and moved her a little roughly away from what she was doing. I lecture her quietly while clenching my teeth and hold back my hand to her. I slap her hand away. I yell, no, no, no. I cross my arms and give her that don't you dare face. I grab the object. The idea is to react as little as possible. We want to show our child that this action no longer gets them the reaction or attention they're looking for. Change your reaction in the following ways. Do not acknowledge verbally that this matters to you. Do not acknowledge physically that this matters to you. For example, do not make a facial expression that would denote displeasure, or shake your head, or wag your finger. Carry on with whatever you were doing at the time they button push. If you are playing a game together, carry on with this game. If you are talking to them, carry on with the conversation. If you were involved with your own activity, carry on with that activity. This way, you're showing them that this action does not get you to react in the same way anymore. Your child will conclude that this is no longer a button to push inside of you and will stop doing that activity to get you to react. Wait a few minutes before you take any action. For example, if their button push was to pee on the floor, wait a few minutes before you clean it up. If your child is talking to you about a subject that you previously found challenging, answer their questions or talk about the topic in a calm and understated way. Special note: to know how to respond to a button push when your child hits you, see Chapter 9. React in a huge way to something you do want them to do. As I have already said, our children are doing this activity to get a reaction from us. So let's give them a reaction to something we do want them to do. Find a time when your child is doing something that you want them to continue to do, such as touching you gently, eating a food item you wanted them to eat, peeing on the potty, drawing on paper and not the wall, dancing, singing a song, looking at you. Give them a huge reaction when they do anything you want them to do. This is the time to jump up and down, vary your voice in an interesting way, wave your arms in the air, and dance in a funny way. Tell them how wonderful this is. Now your child has something to do to get your reaction, and it just happens to be something you want them to do. 2. I will illustrate how I did this using an example of a child I worked with who was peeing on the floor instead of the toilet. I know this was a button push because while he was peeing, he was staring at me, eyes shining, waiting for my response. In a situation like this, you would do the following. Relax. Take a deep breath and remember that this is not the end of the world. A little pee on the floor will not hurt anyone and can be cleaned up. Remind yourself that your child is doing this only to get a reaction from you, and that by relaxing, you will be closer to helping your child not to do this. Don't externally react to being on the floor. Keep verbally quiet about it. Keep your facial expressions the way they were before you noticed your child pee on the floor. If you are smiling, keep smiling. If you had a relaxed, neutral expression, keep that. Carry on with what you were doing. If you're talking to your child about something, carry on with that topic of conversation. If you were in an activity with your child, keep doing that activity. If you were doing a chore, keep on doing that chore. Wait a few minutes before you clean up the pee. When you clean it up, do so in a calm, quiet, and understated way. In the next 30 minutes, find something that your child is doing that you want to give a really big, huge, and wonderfully fun reaction to, so that if your child wants to continue the button push, they can do that activity instead of being on the floor. Exercise 7.4. Now we are going to think about how you are going to respond differently to your child's button pushing. Go to the button pushing worksheet at the end of the chapter and fill in the last section. This will help you be fully prepared to respond differently to the next time you notice your child button pushing. Button pushing action checklist. Check to see if your child is button pushing by seeing if they are displaying the following signs. They look at you while they are doing the activity. They look at you right after they have done the activity. They announce to you that they have just done the activity. They smile or laugh when you react to what they have just done. They do it again right after you've asked them not to, while looking at you. They do something they're not supposed to do, then come and find you to tell you. Deactivate the button push. Internally relax. Soften your thoughts surrounding the action your child is doing. Remind yourself that they are only doing this activity to see a reaction. Remind yourself if you do not react, they will most likely stop doing the activity. Do not react verbally. Do not react physically. Carry on with what you were doing before your child started the button pushing activity. React in a huge, interesting, and lively way to something your child does that you want them to continue to do. Button pushing worksheet. Write down examples of what your child does as a button push. Write down your internal reaction to your child's button push. Write down your external reaction to your child's button push. Now write down the new ways you are going to respond to your child's button push, both internally and externally.